ACID got me seeing souls. They hybrids in my eye beams, but I've been living blindly. Gave my soul up for perfect timing. A desert cat reinvented rhyming. How crazy is that?
Hey, what is going on, guys? So, for those of you who care, I'm maybe 2 weeks away from releasing my Soul Reaver retrospective video. I was in the middle of doing the theory section, and I realized that it was going to be pretty fucking confusing for anyone who doesn't really know the timeline of the Legacy of Kain games. And then I thought to myself, have we ever really had someone basically make a video just describing the timeline? So I looked for it and I didn't find anything. So I'm gonna do it. I decided to take it upon myself to make it easier to understand my next video and to make it easier for you guys to understand the Legacy of Kain timeline in general. I'm going to go ahead and make that video. With that being said, I am going to take a few creative liberties here, and you don't have to agree with it. That's totally fine. But we need basically a concise story, like a consistent, concise story for this timeline. So what I'm going to do is, I'm a Star Wars fan, and in Star Wars, the way that they mark the years is the Battle of Yavin. So you'll constantly hear stuff like ABY, after the Battle of Yavin, BBY, which is before the Battle of Yavin, and we need something like that in the Kain fandom, because there is no like specific year like that. So what we are going to do for the purposes of this timeline is we are going to make Blood Omen the 0 year. So going forward, if you hear me say BBO, that just means before Blood Omen. ABO is going to be after Blood Omen. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that, because it'll make way more sense. And one more thing before we get into this. So most of the information here is going to be off of two things. One is, a lot of this actually comes from the Legacy of Kain fandom website. So I don't want people coming in here saying I plagiarize stuff, because I'm saying it up front right now. A lot of this does come from that website. Other parts of it are going to come from my own personal memory and my own way of changing the timeline around to try to make it make more sense. What we're going to do is we're going to make one timeline. I'm not going to talk about separate parallel timelines. We are going to take all the information that we have, and we are going to turn it into one consistent timeline. And so with that being said, if you guys get that, then let's get on with that. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to establish how far back that they actually meant when they say that thousands of years before Blood Omen was the earliest history in Nosgoth. Now, they're constantly referring to it as millennia, so what I've decided to do is I'm going to put it way, way, way before Blood Omen. So we are going to start this timeline, and we are going to say that it is 30,000 years. So it's going to be at 30,000 BBO. So we are starting at 30,000 BBO. Early history. The land of Nosgoth. Before the dawn of recorded history, Nosgoth is ruled by two elder races, similar in power, but different in method and intention. The vampires and the Hilden. The vampires worship the Wheel of Fate, the cleansing agony of birth, death, and rebirth, the purifying rhythm of the universe, the circle which sustains all life, to which all souls are irresistibly drawn, manipulated by the parasitic, vampiric elder god. 25,000 BBO. The Vampire Hilden War. The Hildens opposed the vampires, tyrannous god, and refused to submit to the Wheel of Fate. For this, The vampires oppress their Hilden adversaries. The races battle for dominance of Nosgoth in a great and apocalyptic war, which flames for thousands of years, and will destroy both victor and vanquisher alike. The genesis of the pillars. We are going to set that at 20,000 BBO because, like I just said, they were fighting for thousands of years, which is why we went so far back into the past to start this. Okay, so the genesis of the pillars, 20,000 BBO. In triumph, the vampires banished the Hilden from the world with powerful magic, sealing them into another plane of existence, and raise the pillars of Nosgoth as the lock that binds them. The 9 pillars reach infinitely high into the sky and deep into the earth, representing the principles of mind, dimension, conflict, nature, energy, time, states, death, and at the center of all, binding them together, balance. 20,000 BBO, the summoning of the guardians. The pillars stand like silent sentinels over Nosgoth, and will perpetually be represented by an oligarchy of sorcerer guardians, known as the Circle of Nine. Each guardian is marked from birth, chosen, and summoned by the pillar he is destined to serve for his lifetime. In return, the guardians are granted longevity and extraordinary powers. The death of a circle member is inevitably followed by the birth of a successor. The supernatural force behind the pillars call a replacement to fulfill that role, whom it is the responsibility of the remaining guardians to seek out and turn into an apprentice. The guardians each represent the principle that their pillars embody, and the balanced guardian is the axis of them all. 20,000 BBO. The affliction of the blood curse. In their defeat, the vanquished Hilden retaliate with a terrible curse as they fall, afflicting the vampires not only with a bloodthirst that turns their once noble race into ravenous predators of humankind, but with sterility as well. With the vampire's transformation comes their enemy's true revenge, immortality. Imprisoned in the flesh, the vampires are expelled from the purifying circle of death and rebirth, and cast from the wheel of fate, plunged into torment and despair, unable to bear the separation from their god. Many of the apostates are driven to madness and self-annihilation. 18,000 BBO. The forging of the Reaver. 2 champions are prophesied, one destined to be Nosgoth's redeemer, the other its destroyer. The vampire hero is destined to wield the mystical sword known as the Reaver, a holy weapon for whom it will be forged. The Hilden foretell a messiah of their own, an adversary worthy of his powers, who will destroy the shackles of the vampire's god, brandishing a fiery sword. 2 heroes locked in combat, which only one will survive. The era of Janos Aldrin begins. A creature reputed to have been the greatest vampire that ever lived, Janos is the 10th guardian, the keeper of the Reaver, the blade crafted by, at the time, a human Vorador at his behest. 11,000 BBO. The Human Revolt. As the vampires begin to die out, the pillars summon human guardians to fulfill their roles. The vampires adopt and, when necessary, abduct the human guardians and make vampires of them when they come of age. Mobius, the guardian of time, is introduced to the elder god when he lives amongst the vampires. A bloody revolt is orchestrated through Morbius by the elder god, led by Mobius and Mortanius, the guardian of death. the humans revolt against their masters, refusing the curse and seizing the pillars as their own. Over time, the ancient vampire's bloodline trickles away until Janos alone remains, sustained solely by obligation and his unfaltering faith in the old prophecies and his guardianship of the Reaver blade. Just as the origins of the pillars is seemingly lost to history, the genesis of the Circle of Nine is also lost and becomes unknown. As long as the pillars have existed, there has been a body of sorcerers sworn to protect them, and millennia pass. 513 BBO, the Vampire Purge, a monastic order of warrior priests charged with the eradication of the vampires and created by the circles formed, known as the Seraphan. Malik, Araziel, Turiel, Duma, Rahab, Zephon, and Malachiah are all commanders of the army. Thousands of vampires are brutally and mercilessly hunted down, and they are driven to the point of near extinction. 506 BBO. Raziel emerges from the forest time-streaming device and unknowingly leads the Seraphan to Janos Adrian. Janos Adrian is murdered, his still beating heart, ripped from his chest. Raziel himself slaughters the Seraphan commanders and is his own murderer, and unearths how he thus becomes the catalyst not only for Kain's future empire, but for his own dark destiny. Out of retaliation, Vordor takes his revenge upon the Circle. He infiltrates their stronghold and murders 6 of the sorcerers, before humiliating the Seraphan general Malik, the pillar of conflict in combat. Finally, Raziel realizes he is fated to become the ravenous spirit imprisoned inside of the Soul Reaver. That this is, and always has been, the hellish cycle of his destiny. The Wraithblade, he finally understands, is his own soul, twinned and bound eternally to him. Kain prevents the blade from consuming Raziel's soul, but Raziel, nearly obliterated by the Reaver, realized that he can never escape his terrible destiny. Kain has merely postponed it. 506 BBO. The Necromancer Mortanius, one of the surviving Circle members and the Pillar of Death, punishes Malik for his failure to protect the Circle by fusing his soul into a magical suit of armor. Vordor retreats from the world of human affairs and huddles himself up inside his remote mansion in the Terrigen Forest, and the Seraphan Crusade ceases. 50 BBO. Kain travels 50 years into Nosgoth's past, and then Kain assassinates the young King William the Just, who would have gone on to become the Nemesis. Azimuth, not content with summoning demonic thralls, steals a time-streaming device in order to gather creatures from other ages as well. Since Azimuth is the Dimension Guardian, she cannot pull creatures from other times, only from other places or dimensions. Through the use of the time-streaming device that she possesses, Azimuth pulls Terrell from the future back to the bowels of Avernus Cathedral. Azimuth and Mortanius serve the Hilden, and they are seduced away from their service of the Pillars by the power that they unearth beneath Avernus Cathedral. The newcomer, Mortanius, becomes possessed by the Hilden Lord, a leader amongst the Hilden, who has his own agenda. Their two wills struggle for dominance of Mortanius's body. At times, Mortanius maintains a modicum of control. Other times, the Hilden Lord manipulates him to do evil, like a sinister puppeteer. 30 BBO, the corruption of the pillars. Upon emerging from the chronoplast time portal, Raziel discovers that he has been transported nearly 2,000 years into Nosgoth's past, to a time roughly 30 years before Kain's resurrection as a vampire, but a decade after Kain's own ill-fated journey into Nosgoth's history and his assassination of William the Just. Ariel, the Pillar of Balance, is murdered, apparently at Mortanius' hands, but it is actually the Hilden Lord who is possessing Mortanius. Ariel's murder drives her beloved Nupraptor insane with grief. In his agony, he unleashes a telepathic assault which ripples across the land of Nosgoth, infecting the other members of the Circle, who are all symbiotically connected with his madness. With the infection of Nupraptor's madness, the Circle, who, as the protectors of hope, are sworn to preserve the land, are now poisoning the land with their deranged sorcery. The human Kain is born, the son of one of Nosgoth's most noble families. He is, unknowingly to him, marked from birth as Ariel's successor. It is his destiny to take her place as the Pillar of Balance. The pillars reflect their patron's corruption, growing gray and corroded. For Nosgoth to be preserved, the infection must be completely eliminated. How to do this? The entire Circle of Nine, now wholly corrupted, must die, so that the pillars may cull new successors from the populace, and the land may be healed with their purity. Raziel and the Elder Kain then travel over 100 years into Nosgoth's future. 0 BBO. The events of Blood Omen and the collapse of the pillars. Mortanius orchestrates Kain's assassination. Mortanius is in control for now. Kain is ambushed by bandits who murder him by impaling him with a sword. Kain's body is interred in a crypt west of his hometown. Kain awakens in the underworld, where Mortanius offers to revive him, so that Kain may take revenge upon his assassins. Kain, heedless of the cost, accepts the necromancer's offer. The catch: in order to rejoin the world of the living, Kain is reborn as a vampire. Kain awakens and begins his unlife as a vampire. Kain finds his assassins and kills them, getting his revenge, but Mortanius drives him to the pillars, saying that the bandits were only the instruments of his murder, but not the cause. Kain visits the decaying pillars for the first time, meets the specter Ariel, and learns the nature of his quest. The Circle, the sorcerers, poisoning Nosgoth, must be destroyed, for the land to be healed and the pillars to be made whole. Ariel promises him release and peace when the balance is restored. Following Ariel's direction, Kain hunts down and kills the Circle members one by one, returning tokens of their service in order to heal each pillar in turn. The mentalist Nupraptor is Kain's first victim. Kain confronts the immortal warrior Malik in his frozen, bleak stronghold, but Malik eludes him. Kain meets the Oracle of Nosgoth, a reclusive soothsayer who holds court in the Arctic caves. The Oracle warns Kain of the legions of the Nemesis attacking from the north, of the beheaded King Otmar of Willendorf. Helpless to withstand their attack, he gives Kain some of Malik's history, including his defeat centuries ago at the hands of the vampire Vorador. Kain, intrigued, asks for more information about Vorador. The Oracle directs him to Vorador's mansion. The Oracle is in fact Mobius, the Time Streamer, member of the Circle of Nine, representing the Pillar of Time. He uses his guise of the Oracle to influence pilgrims and orchestrate events as he sees fit. Kain meets Vorador, Nosgoth's oldest vampire. Vorador recounts the stories of the Seraphin Purge and his revenge upon the Circle and Malik. Kain discovers a mysterious time-streaming device planted by Mobius. Kain activates the time-streaming device and is propelled nearly 50 years back in time. Kain returns to present-day Nosgoth and discovers that the assassination of William the Just 50 years ago triggered a renewed vampire purge. Kain cleanses each of the pillars, leaving only balance at the end. Ariel appears and reveals to Kain that he is the pillar of balance, and that the only way the pillars can be healed is for him to sacrifice himself to the pillar. She presents him with the final climactic decision: sacrifice himself to heal the world, or refuse the sacrifice and ensure the world's corruption. Kain chooses the latter path and decides to rule the world in its damnation, or rather to commit himself to oblivion. 109 ABO Raziel's Detour. As Raziel exits the time-streaming chamber, he realizes that Mobius has tricked him. Raziel sees memorials commemorating Mobius' murder at the hands of Kain, and the climax of the vampire purge, Vorador's execution. As he works his way through the nightmare stronghold, he encounters the specter of Mobius, who has been dead now for over a century. Kain enters the ruined pillars clearing and sees the devastation wrought by Kain's faithful decision over a century ago. In the gloom, he sees the specter of Ariel drifting restlessly amongst the toppled pillars. Raziel revisits the subterranean pillars grotto after having been propelled over a century into Nosgoth's ghastly future. Raziel and the other Kain travel over 600 years into Nosgoth's past. Vorador's resurrection. Vorador returns from the grave in unexplained circumstances. Vorador creates a new race of vampires, and from that race, Kain recruits his legions. Kain becomes the powerful commander of an army bent on ruling the land of Nosgoth. 214 ABO The Vampire Seraphin War. The Hilden Lord uses his magic to draw other Hilden through the lock and key that is the pillars, but is yet to become powerful enough to begin a full invasion. He requires an army and humans to drain of energy. He learns of a legendary order whose purpose was to purge the world of vampires long ago. He revives this order. The Seraphin Order are reborn. In response to Kain's ascension to power, the revived Seraphin appear in the land of Nosgoth. They are a group of militant and zealot humans led by the Hilden Lord. The Seraphin clash with Kain's army over decades of blood-stained and internal conflict. Eventually, the war ends with the Seraphin triumphantly defeating Kain's army. In the final battle, the Hilden Lord defeats Kain in mortal combat, strips him of the Soul Reaver, and tosses him off a cliff of an abyss of apparent demise. 402 ABO The Death of the Hilden Lord. When Kain's torn body is found, it is revived and brought to the capital of Nosgoth, the city of Meridian. In the 2 centuries that Kain is dormant in hibernation, the Seraphin rise and take a fascist control over most of Nosgoth. Far from the great empire they once embodied, the vampires now exist only as a small resistance to the Seraphin, called the Cabal, in Meridian. It is into this resistance that Kain emerges and is now, by brotherhood and by lust for vengeance, a part of. The ambition of the resistance is simple: slay the Hilden Lord, and the Seraphim order will crumble. Because the Seraphim have no knowledge of Kain's existence, he is the perfect agent to locate and kill the Hilden Lord. Kain agrees to help the Cabal for the time being, until which time he sees fit to follow his own agenda and seek revenge at all cost. Now, as an addendum, I just want to make one point right here. I am omitting a lot of Blood Omen 2 from this timeline purposely, because especially towards the end of that game, there's a lot of shit that does not make any sense. And we will go into that when we get to the Blood Omen 2 retrospective video. But for now, we're just going to say that Kain succeeded. He beat the Hilden Lord, and we moved on. So let's just keep it at that for now. It's way easier to explain instead of having to try to figure out how to explain the fact that Janos was alive while Kain was alive, and they both had a heart, which makes no fucking sense because Janos' heart is in Kain's body. So anyways, like I said, we're just gonna pretend that shit didn't happen. Kain kills the Hilden Lord, and we're moving on. Well, actually, no, I got one more thing to say about this. The only thing that would make sense is if my theory was true, the one from the Blood Omen retrospective video. In that video, I talked about a theory I had, which was that Mobius had the Heart of Darkness before it was given to Kain, and that was basically his home. And that I theorized basically that if you have Janos' heart, when it gets taken out of you, you don't die. And basically what I was trying to say in that theory was, as long as Janos' heart beats somewhere, you're alive. So the only thing that would make sense is if that theory was true, and so because the heart got put into Mobius and it was beating again, it basically revived Janos, which is a stretch, I know, but like I said, that was my theory from that video, and to me that's the only thing that would make any sense as to why Janos is alive in Blood Omen 2 while Kain is alive at the same time. So, but yeah, okay, let's move on. 516 ABO, the raising of the lieutenants. With intentional irony, Kain sets the ruined pillars as the symbiotic seat of his fledgling empire, with the unrestored balance pillar as the base of his throne. Kain establishes his empire by recruiting 6 lieutenants. Kain, raised by necromancy, cannot turn a vampire via the traditional blood gift. Instead, he must use a small portion of his vampiric soul and infuse it into the corpse, and then draw the corpse's soul back into the body. The corpse is then revived as a fledgling vampire. In an act of calculated blasphemy, Kain raids the ancient tomb of the 6 martyred Seraphim commanders. Their well-entombed corpses, though long dead, have been spared the corruption of the grave. Going from crypt to crypt, he breathes his reviving gift into each of the desecrated Seraphim knights. Thus he raises his 6 firstborn vampiric sons to become the lieutenants of his fledgling empire. 614 ABO, the Holy War. Kain's empire grows. The 6 lieutenants recruit clans of their own, turning the corpses of their human victims to do their bidding. The destruction of the major human kingdoms is inevitable. Within 100 years, humanity is thoroughly domesticated. Some feral humans remain scattered across the highlands, clinging to their hopeless holy war to rid Nosgoth of the vampire scourge, a battle they will never win. 1500 ABO, Raziel's execution. Over the centuries, each of the vampires undergo a series of evolutionary adaptations, or rather, dark gifts. But preceding this, they go into a hibernation period. These hibernation periods are what allows the vampires to emerge transformed. Raziel emerges from one of these evolutionary hibernations, having grown wings. he returns to the sanctuary of the clans to present himself to Kain and reveal his latest gift. Kain becomes seemingly jealous of the wings that Raziel has been able to procure, rips them off, and sentences him to death by throwing him into the abyss. 2500 ABO. Raziel's resurrection. Raziel is revived by the mysterious elder god, supposedly, at the bottom of the abyss, and is reborn as a reaver of souls. Raziel returns to reap the vampire's apostate souls and take his revenge on his vampire brethrens and his creator, Kain. Terrell is summoned back in time and used by the Hilden to command the Xenobites of Avernus in order to further their final cause of toppling the Pillars. Raziel confronts Kain within the ruins of the Pillar Sanctuary. Kain attacks Raziel with the Soul Reaver, his ancient sword. The blade is destroyed on impact. Now a Wraith Blade, the Soul Reaver intertwines with Raziel and becomes his symbiotic weapon. Raziel pursues Kain through Mobius's ancient chronoplast time portal and is plunged into Nosgoth's past. The latest history. The Spirit Forge summons every balanced guardian to itself. Ariel's spirit, united with the souls of her predecessors, is drawn back in time for one final baptism of the Wraith Blade. Now armed with his true endeavor, the Scion of Balance is destined to return the Pillars to vampiric rule, and Kain's coin continues to turn. And that is the end of the timeline as we know it. Because unfortunately we were never given Dark Prophecy, which is the game that was supposed to come out after Defiance, because there was supposed to be 6 games in this series. If I was gonna guess, I would imagine that it would be a pretty simplistic plot. Kain probably just ends up killing the Elder God. I personally think that the Elder God would have basically been shown to just be like some ancient vampire who's living off the wheel of life, because I've always thought that he was a vampire. I feel like the game's made that very clear that we are supposed to believe that he is a vampire and that he's basically just, doing his thing, trying to live, trying to fuck with people because he wants to eat more food. I've never bought this whole thing about the Elder God being an actual god. I really don't think he's a god. And I do not think that he actually revived Raziel. I think Raziel just happened to survive. And then the Elder God found him and was like, well, I'll just use this guy for my own advantages, for my own uses. And then he just basically told Raziel a bunch of fucking lies. That's what I've always felt. But I'll talk more about that in the Soul Reaver retrospective video. And again, that video should be coming out pretty soon here. Anybody here who's watching this who has also watched that video, thank you very, very much. I love this series. I got a lot more to come for you guys, so please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this timeline. So yeah, with that being said, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and end this here. And everybody take it easy, and I will see you guys soon with the Soul Reaver retrospective video. So, late.